Hi, I'm Will from Tested.
I'm Norm from Tested, and this is a Sony CyberShot RX100.
That looks like a point and shoot, Norm.
It absolutely looks like a point and shoot given how small it is and how light it weighs, but it also costs $600.
That is a really expensive point and shoot. Who's gonna pay 600 bucks for a point and shoot?
Well, if you're a newbie photographer, $600 is asking a lot, but you're also probably gonna get the best images you've ever taken in your entire life.
Better than your iPhone, better than your $250 point and shoot. Let's talk about why.
Sure. For newbies, there are a couple settings that make this very neophyte friendly. There's the intelligent auto, superior auto settings, which means you basically leave it on those modes, press the shutter, and you're gonna get a decent picture no matter what environment you're in.
So bozo mode.
Yeah, definitely bozo mode. There are also, if you want to go a little more advanced, special scene mode. So, for example, if my mom wants to take pictures of the cat or the dog, there's a pet mode. If you want to take pictures of the family, there's a portrait mode with auto cropping, auto framing. If you want to take photos of the sunset or the landscape or the twilight, or even if you want to take photos of your food, guess what? There's a food mode.
But the pictures are good?
The pictures are good enough because the processor and these presets are smart enough to know what you're looking for. Of course, you can take better pictures if you tweak the settings, but for newbies, these photos are great.
So what does this offer pro shooters?
So if you're someone who's used to shooting with an expensive DSLR, this RX100 will actually have many of the settings that you're accustomed to.
So aperture, exposure, ISO, all that kind of stuff?
All those basic functionalities are accessible not only in the software but also with hardware buttons. You can change the aperture priority, shutter priority, full manual, just the rotation of a button, or if you use the programmable buttons on the back, you can quickly access settings like white balance, exposure compensation, ISO, or shutter speed.
And does it have manual focus as well?
There is manual focus as well. It is a fixed lens, which means you can't swap out the lens, but the lens is really good. It's a wide iris, you get really shallow depth of field, but you can also move the ring around and get whatever focus you want.
And zoom as well?
There's zoom, it's optical zoom, but it's actually a digital control on top of the camera, and it zooms basically to the equivalent of a 100mm lens or 3.6x zoom.
So just like a point and shoot.
Just like a point and shoot. But it's not small enough that would fit in any of my jean pockets. It's small enough that would fit comfortably in any jacket pocket.
But you wear skinny jeans, Norm. What about a guy like me?
If you wear cargo pants, sure, this will fit in cargo pants. You should not be wearing cargo pants.
Just put it in your jacket pocket.
So this is either a really expensive camera, a really nice expensive camera for someone just getting into photography who might not have any intention to buy additional lenses, or a compact complementary camera if you're someone who's already had thousands of dollars invested in a high-end DSLR, but needs a camera to go travel with, just dump in the jacket pocket, put in the day pack, and not to carry a separate backpack around for.
So you like the camera?
I really like the camera.
Use cases.
For those use cases. $600, I think, is a great price for this camera.
And the photos are fantastic.
And the photos are amazing.
So that's your review of the RX100, Norm.
But let's go sit down because there's a ton more to talk about this camera and camera technologies in general.
Okay, so we're back for the extended talk about, well, why you like this camera.
Yeah,
Norm.
why I like the Sony RX100 camera. It is an expensive camera, like we said. It's $650 MSRP, $600 in most places now, which is on the high end. Not everyone's going to go out, especially when they look at a camera that looks small. You know, they think point and shoot.
It's a fixed lens point and shoot, just to be clear. I mean, that's not the most expensive point and shoot in the market.
Not the most expensive one you can buy right now. There are ones like $2,000, $3,000. But even at $600, especially when all the other point and shoots, the cheapo ones, are getting, you know, $200, $100. $600 looks like a lot. So we need to talk about why this camera is worth it. Yeah,
that's the big question. Because like I spent $700, got a mirrorless NEX camera. It's great. It has multiple lenses. I can do all sorts of stuff with it. It's very kind of I can do whatever I want. I can adjust aperture, exposure, ISO.
Yeah, it's a real camera.
It's a real camera.
Yes. So let's talk about the things that make a camera important. When you're shopping for a camera, what are the things you look for, that you should be looking for? Well,
megapixels is the trap, right?
Megapixels is the trap. So even though you might see on the camera, it's 20 megapixels right there. It says 20.2 megapixels. What they don't say on this camera that Sony actually does on their new mirrorless cameras is the sensor size. If you look at a new Sony camera like the Sony NEX F3 or the 5N or the 5R or the 6, it'll say on the front APS-C because that's the size of the camera. It's a standard.
Right. Well, it's a Sony standard.
Well, no, it's a universal standard.
Okay.
Everyone has a different measure for APS-C. Canons are a little bigger. But APS-C is an industry standard. Inside here is what's called a 1-inch sensor. That doesn't mean that...
Does that mean diagonal, or...?
It does not. It's very, very confusing. If you look at the sensor inside, for example, this is an NEX-C3. This is an APS-C sensor. So you see it's relatively big. And so you would think that if I told you, oh, this one has a 1-inch sensor, a 1-inch class sensor, that if you pulled open lens, which you can't, it would be 1 inch diagonal. It is not. It's more closer to 0.62 inches. That's because the old way, the way they measured sensors relative to 35 millimeters, 1 inch is just their equivalent. Like,
it's because of the framing, because the sensors were smaller than 35 millimeter film, basically?
Yeah, so I think it's technically like a 16 millimeter sensor diagonal. It's smaller than APS-C, smaller than Micro Four Thirds. So Panasonic Olympus is Micro Four Thirds format, which is also for their mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras. But the same size as a Nikon CX. So Nikon CX is also a 1-inch sensor, and they use that for their interchangeable V1 and J1 cameras, which frankly weren't reviewed very well.
That was their first stab at the mirrorless equivalent, and they whiffed.
So this one, having the 1-inch sensor compared to a point and shoot, so something you'd buy like a CyberShot, S100, or even one of those PowerShot S100, is bigger, much bigger. So
if we're at, let's say, Walmart or Best Buy, looking at the point and shoot section, this is going to be the biggest, one of the bigger sensors in the point and shoot section.
One of the largest sensors.
Which makes sense, because it's a lot more expensive.
Yes, unless you find like something like a Leica, it's a fixed lens, or the Sony RX1, which has a full frame sensor. This is probably going to be the biggest sensor in the point and shoot department. So the sensor size, what that means though, with a larger sensor, not only does that mean that your low lights can be better, it means that because there's more surface area, more light comes in.
So the pixels are actually bigger.
There can be more pixels, but there's more space. There's more physical space for light to hit and for the processor to compute. It also means that with a bigger sensor, you take more advantage of the lens. So the lens, with a smaller lens or a wider lens, you actually get more of the lens, more light, more bokeh, more depth of field with a larger sensor.
It's a larger area for the lens to focus the light onto.
So compare this to, so that's the sensor, 20 megapixels. So compare this to, like, for example,
it's a CMOS sensor,
it's a
like
CMOS
everything
sensor.
else, right?
Yep. Compared to the NEX series, like those are 16 megapixel, 20. This is 20 megapixels, so you get technically the images are larger, the files are larger, but the sensor is bigger. So, like you're going back to earlier, the megapixel myth, don't follow that. Just because the more expensive 5R, NEX6, NEX7 has 16 to 20 megapixel sensors, and this is 20 megapixel, doesn't mean that this is automatically better.
So on cheap cameras with high megapixel ratings, the images are usually pretty noisy in my experience.
Very
is that
noisy.
the case with this?
So not very noisy images. The quality of images is going to be, I'm going to say, very close to APS-C, at least in daylight.
And when we talk about noise, we're talking about like graininess.
Yeah. So when you zoom into an image and you look at like in the dark levels, in the shadows, whether it's actually black or whether you actually see lots of grain, like fake digital grain. You do get grain because the sensor isn't that big, but it is very relatively low noise. So other things about the sensor, also because the sensor is tied to the processor and how it computes, there's ISO range. ISO range is 80, which is relatively low, all the way to 6400 with a little bit of boost. ISO is also something that's a little misleading too. So when you say something like, ISO 125 or ISO 200 on a camera compared to another camera, they're not exactly going to be the same. So,
it was the same way in the film days too. Fuji 125 and Kodak 125 were a little bit different.
Yeah, a little bit different. So ISO 80 means that it's going to be the least grainy. That's the least grainy setting for this camera, and that's actually very low. Those images are great. If you have enough light coming in, if your shutter speed's fast enough.
So bright daylight, super crisp, summertime maybe, not even wintertime.
And low, and it's great that the ISO goes down to 80. 6400, I'd say it's usable up to 1600 or 3200. I would not shoot at 6400. Maybe if you have to.
And once you get beyond that, it's for special use stuff, like shooting pictures of the stars and stuff like that.
For that, or if you're in a very, very dark room, a bar, and there's no lighting, you don't want to use the flash.
And so you mentioned before, everything's adjustable on this camera, just like you would have with the mirrorless cameras, the NEX series.
Most of the things are adjustable, which I'll get to in just a second. But one more thing about the sensor, it goes 3 stops for exposure compensation. So you go 1, 2, or 3 in increments of thirds. And also for focus, it is contrast-based autofocus. So it's not phase-based autofocus like in a full DSLR.
Okay, so phase-based is better.
Phase-based is faster and better, more accurate. Even though it's contrast-based, I found the autofocus relatively fast. So I can, click and, there is the light, the IR light to get autofocus, but basically I can focus and take pictures, relatively quickly.
Does it have assisted focus?
Like manual focus?
Manual focus?
Yes, there is. So while there's autofocus, you can also hold down, like with some of these cameras, hold down so you get the green box and then rotate your lens ring to change focus.
And it's giving you the white lines that are showing across. That's the same way it works on the mirrorless camera.
Yeah.
It just shows you
called peaking.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the autofocus is fast enough for a point and shoot. I would say fast enough to capture moving, like
kids playing soccer?
I would say a sitting animal, but not a running animal.
Okay. So if you want to take high-speed pictures of the dog running, you need a faster lens.
You need to change the settings here. In the program mode, you're not going to be able to do that very well. So that's the sensor, basically. Now let's talk about the lens.
Can we talk about the EV comp for a little bit? Because I don't understand what that is. I'm really interested. I'm curious.
Sure. So
I never used.
Right here, there are a couple ways, depending on what mode you shoot the camera in, for you to get more light in. So, for example, you can change the ISO, which I can do right now, and it starts at 80. And I can go all the way up. Now, because I'm shooting in aperture priority mode.
So ISO, it controls how sensitive to light the sensor is at a particular setting, right?
Yep. Okay. So right now, my focus is, my intent is to shoot in aperture mode, which means I want to shoot at how open I want the iris to be.
Okay.
I want the iris to be, f1.8. I want a really shallow depth of field, so I want to fix that. And so what's variable, what's automatically changing, is the shutter speed on here. So the shutter speed is 1 right now. It goes all the way up to 1/2000th of a second.
Okay, that's fast for a point and shoot.
That's not bad. And so it's changing right now, 1/320th, and the faster shutter speed, the less blurry your images are going to be.
Right. Okay.
Now, if I change ISO all the way down, that's at 32 right now, all the way down to 80, now shutter speed has to be longer, has to stay open longer for it to capture the same image quality. And right now it's down to 1/8, which is really slow shutter.
This is a second.
You have to have this. You have to have your camera basically on a tripod or hold your hand very still to get a stable image. Other way you can change to increase the shutter speed while keeping low ISO and also keeping the iris what you want is to change the exposure, do exposure compensation. So you can say intentionally make my images darker so that the shutter doesn't need to be as fast. So right now I can go all the way down, it goes to 1 stop, and see the image is getting darker right now.
Okay.
All the way down to 3 stops, and at 3 stops down, my shutter now only needs to be 1/60th of a second as opposed to the 1/20th or 1/10th of a second.
So this is just you telling the camera that it's okay for it to be a little bit darker.
Okay,
You're not doing anything to the image other than exposing it less than it would otherwise.
And taking in less light, it's intentionally taking in less light or taking more light.
So it's not like loading the image in Photoshop and then pushing the brightness and contrast up.
It's tapping into the
on
sensor.
The camera. Okay.
Yep, so that's a sensor, and that's the first thing I look to when I look.
That's the most important.
The most important spec of a camera.
Although on a point and shoot where the lens is fixed, I would say the lens is just as important as the sensor.
Absolutely, just as important. Yeah. So, like you said, it is a fixed lens. What's on the camera is what's going to be on the camera
forever and ever. Amen.
There's no way to pop it out, change it. But the good thing is, it's a very good lens as well. So what's on here is a Carl Zeiss 1.8 to 4.9. And what that means, if you don't know camera terminology, is that the iris, the aperture, opens up all the way to 1.8. Lower the number. It's technically like f/1.8.
So that means it's all the way up. It is a bigger iris than.
Yeah. So the lower number, the wider the iris, the more light comes in, the shallower your depth of field
and the
gets.
smaller the f number.
And the smaller the f number, f1.8. That is when you're zoomed all the way out. f1.8 to 4.9 means when you zoom all the way in. Because you're zooming in, because you're changing the optics, it has to close the iris.
It's because of the mechanics of the camera.
So it goes all the way to f4.9 when you're zoomed in.
Okay.
So that's the other point to make, is that this is actually a zoom lens. You don't have, like for example, this MLAC, you don't have a ring to zoom the lens. It's an optical zoom, but you use a knob on the top.
There's a little motor in there.
Yeah,
that
there's a little motor,
in
which I can show you. You can zoom all the way in. And technically, this is a 10 millimeter lens zoomed all the way out.
Okay.
That
is that
doesn't mean
adjusted
much.
based on the sensor size, or is that?
That is. So
okay.
It's in true 10 millimeters, but you have to adjust that because there's a crop factor with the sensor. And so the equivalent, because the crop factor on a 1-inch sensor is about 2.7, 2.8, is about a 28 millimeter.
Okay.
Which is not super wide. It's not considered a wide angle lens.
So what a normal like walking around town lens, if you don't want to, if you don't think you're going to be shooting anything zoom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
28 is fine. For example, this lens is a 18 to 55.
Right.
But the equivalent, it goes higher because there's a crop right here as well. So this is a 18 or 28 millimeter, and it zooms all the way to 100 millimeter. So it does do a fair zoom. I'm not a big fan of the motorized zoom.
It's a little slow.
And the other thing I don't like about the motorized zoom is that, like you see, I'm zooming all the way in now, so it's at 100 millimeters. I automatically go to f9. The iris closes pretty quickly. So when I'm at half zoom, I can't get the same depth of field, not nearly the same depth of field as I could at the full zoomed out. Full zoomed out, I can get really good depth of field, really good shallow depth, because 1.8 is really wide. But once I'm zoomed into about 50 millimeter equivalent, I'm already at f3.5, which is still not bad. You can get some depth, but it's not going to be as wide. Less light's going to come in. You have to compensate with EV comp or shutter speed at that point.
But you're not going to, in order to get depth of field at that, you're going to have to zoom. You're going to have to walk way back, zoom in, and hopefully the light works for what you're shooting.
You'll need a little more light for that. But it is a very good lens overall. And you can get macro shots really, really close. So I think it's about a 5 centimeter.
That's pretty good. I can't do that with my NEX.
So I'm zooming in right now. And so this is like basically right in front of the camera and in focus and captured.
It's literally that far away.
Yeah, that far away.
Yeah. So how does this compare? Like one of the things that's interesting to this to me is I bought a mirrorless camera and then I've only used the kit lens essentially. Yeah. So if you're not going to buy lenses, is this better or worse than buying it like an NEX?
I think it's totally sufficient.
Okay.
For shooting your kid portraits, daytime.
Going out to bars?
Yeah, totally good for going out to bars. Not going to be good for your specialized needs like your landscape shots, wide shots. If you want some, you're not going to be able to do cool things like take out the lens and do an ultra macro shot. Okay. You basically can't specialize. It's an all-purpose lens. Fixed lens. One thing I also want to mention is we talked about autofocus earlier.
Yeah.
Now there is what Sony calls the assisted focus. So I can, hold the button down and get a focus, and then manually rotate the lens here to change my focus.
And that lets you kind of dial it in if the autofocus doesn't pick up exactly what you want.
If you noticed earlier, I'm actually spinning this a lot to change the focus. Like it's not as responsive as I want it to be. I would prefer that within one rotation.
Yeah, like it seems like a quarter of a turn, right?
A quarter of a turn, I get the full range, but I have to do like basically a couple turns to get the full range of focus.
Is it analog? That's not actually wired into anything. It's
I think this is digital.
It's just the sensor, right?
Yeah, this is not the ring here. I don't think it's wired into focus because this ring is actually programmable in manual mode. You can use this to change whatever you want. Shutter speed,
like aperture, shutter, ISO.
Yeah.
Okay. That's something I wish actually the NEX cameras had. I mean the manual focus on that is great, but when you don't use it, I'd much rather have shutter and aperture on there.
Yeah, I think it's all right. I do like the manual focus on these. It's a little looser.
It's easier to reach too, I would think.
And if I'm shooting video, then I can do like some fancy rack focus with it. You're not going to be able to do that fancy type of rack focus smoothly with this ring. So we've talked about sensor. We talked about the lens.
How does it all go together?
Well, there's also the image quality.
Yeah, that's what I want to know about.
Image quality is going to be. I think if you put on a monitor, if you crop your images, if you put them to maybe 2560 width, right? Most people upload images, I think maybe 1920 if you want a full screen on a web browser. For web, I would be hard pressed to find the difference, to see the difference in the JPEG between this camera and this camera.
So between the mirrorless, the nice mirrorless that you have had for a year now, and the new point and shoot.
And this camera, this, especially some of the macro shots, you get so close, and the color depth is really great. The dynamic range is great, so the stuff in the shadows. If you shoot at something that's a really bright city street, and you have lots of reflection from cars, you're still going to see a lot of detail. It's really, really good.
Can you do stuff like exposure bracketing and things like that as well?
Yeah, you can do HDR. You can have three-shot HDR. It has all those features. I would say the one thing is because the sensor size is not as big as APS-C, when you get into like the fine zoomed-in details, even at the most optimal settings with perfect lighting, you're going to see a little more grain in those images. But that's only if you're zoomed in. It is
a point and shoot
expected.
versus a kind of real camera,
Absolutely. But that's just the limitation of the physical size of the sensor.
So you said before it'll go up to 6400 ISO, but it seems like 1600 is where you want to stop.
Yeah. 1600, anything above 1600, and on my desktop, you can zoom in, you'll see the grain.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you're a perfectionist, if you're looking for image quality, maybe that's good enough for web. And if you're forced to use that, sure, that's good because if something's moving fast or you have low light, something like the combots or something, if you robots flying around. You'll need to amp up the ISO in some cases. But 1600 ISO for this camera is what I would think is the most that I would accept.
And can you tell the camera, hey, this is as high or as low as I want to go?
Yeah, you can.
Oh,
so
that's nice.
One of the nice features in this camera is that you can have auto ISO, but actually change the auto ISO, the minimum, the floor, and the ceiling. So many cameras, you can change ISO, and you can change to the range, whatever the range is, from here all the way to 6400. And then you have an auto ISO, right, which it'll just pick whatever the camera thinks best to get a sharp image, a non-blurry image. But you can also have a minimum and a maximum. So if you look in the bottom, there are two numbers here. One says ISO 125 and one says ISO 1600.
Okay.
I can actually change that in the settings, and I can set the minimum. Actually, 125 is the lowest it'll go.
Okay.
But you can change the max so it doesn't go to 3300, doesn't go to 6400.
If you want, so you can say, hey, I'd rather use the flash than jack up the ISO at this point, basically, for the camera.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. Does it have like other stuff? Like I'm sure it has a timer and stuff like that. But
so you have your standard shooting modes. So you have your single shooting modes, your continuous shooting, your speed priority shooting, which lets you get up to like 10 frames per second, which is fast. And that's when you're going to want to shoot like the running dogs or the kids.
So you hold the shutter down when something exciting's happening. The kids swinging at the T-ball or whatever.
Exactly. And then you have your timers. Everything that's pretty standard with most cameras.
Does it do all the kind of bozo mode stuff like the NEX cameras do? This is the sunset mode. This is the macro mode. This is the portrait mode. That kind of thing.
Sony actually, because this is a point and shoot, and I think they expect some people might buy this for not only people who know how to use cameras, but people who don't know how to use cameras. Maybe someone like Gary who just wants a simple.
You want something you can aim at the kid.
The newbie mode, right?
Yeah.
There are several newbie modes.
Okay.
So on the top,
seems kind of counterintuitive. You'd think newbies would want one mode that's the do everything wonder mode.
There's one, and there's specialized versions. On the top, there's a physical PASM setting dial, which I like.
Explain PASM.
So you have program, aperture, the priority settings. So program, which is basically your default auto mode. You have your aperture priority, shutter priority, and then full manual.
I like that there's a dedicated knob for that, because on the NEX cameras you have to go into it's like a radial menu, which is
it's a radial menu, but it's for someone like me, I'm never going to change that. I'm going to stick to aperture priority.
I guess that's true.
This isn't configurable either. It's nice, but for someone like Gary, it's even nicer for him because then you can change between the different smart modes, the dummy modes. So you have something called
the bozo modes.
Yeah, the bozo modes. You have your intelligent auto, that's the default bozo mode, and Sony actually has done a really good job of. This intelligent auto is also on their NEX cameras.
When I no knock against Gina, she doesn't want to learn how to use the camera. Yep. When I hand it to her and she needs to take pictures, I put it in intelligent auto. The pictures turn out
intelligent
fine.
auto.
Yeah.
That's fine. Something they also introduced with the new NEXs, this generation's, is the Intelligent Superior. And so this one emphasizes reducing blur and noise, and you're supposed to get an even nicer image. It's just another version. Okay. They set different priorities.
They're moving levers in the settings. Okay.
What's more interesting, though, is for someone who wants to maybe not know the technical terms, but want to know that that you should be shooting differently in the dark, or for portraits,
or for sports or whatever. Yeah,
or scenes. So you have scene selection mode. So I'll select that, and you can actually change what type of scene you're shooting for. So you have things like shooting a portrait.
Okay.
And so automatically, changes the aperture. So you have nice bokeh in the background. Okay. I'll actually do some portrait cropping in. So auto frame. So if people don't know like the rule of thirds, you can shoot a face on, it'll recognize a face, and then it'll auto crop.
Really?
Auto crop in and save another image. So you get 2 images. You get stuff like pet mode. So literally it says pet mode. So it anticipates, a cat to be
goldfish
moving,
yeah,
it's going to be vibrating, purring. So it'll try to, and it actually does work.
So it's going to tweak for higher shutter speed and more.
And
light.
you're going to love this. There's also gourmet mode
for shooting food pictures.
It's for shooting food pictures, which they know it's going to be some type of macro shot, possibly low light.
Right. Vibrant, bring out the colors.
Yep. And so you have your landscapes and your sunsets and even your twilights.
And is it smart enough with that stuff to know that if you have people standing in front of a sunset, it needs to do fill flash and stuff like that, or
I don't think
not so much?
It's not that smart.
Okay,
no. It's basically there's different presets.
Okay,
with a little bit of computation built in. But I primarily shoot in the aperture mode. Oh, I do want to talk about there's picture settings. Now these are almost like Instagram filters for the camera. I'm going to go quickly show you right now. Go in my settings. But, a lot of the computation stuff is built in. There are picture effects. So if I turn on a picture effect, you can actually do something like pop color or, toy camera mode. So this is like Instagram's equivalent of some vintage filter.
Okay.
Which actually
so
looks okay.
That's the Russian, I bought a cheap Russian camera filter.
It does something actually that I don't think you can do in Photoshop easily is new partial colors. And NEX cameras have this as well, which means that everything's going to be black and white except for example, a red. So only the reds show.
And will it save both versions when it does this, or does it just save the? Oh, that's nice. So if you don't, your mistakes aren't permanent.
Yeah, there you go. I can just see Captain America's pants.
There you go. Who doesn't love Captain America's pants?
Or yellow or red.
Do you want to take a minute and talk about, well, hold on. Before we go on, it does grid lines and all that stuff as well, I assume.
Yeah.
There's no viewfinder because it's just, you use the screen.
Yes. It does a grid line, so right now I turn on as many grids as I can.
You like the horizontal and the diagonal and the vertical?
I love the vertical, horizontal.
Okay.
And you can
do you want to talk about why you use those just a little bit? I mean, we've talked about it before on the site.
Like, for example, when I'm taking a picture and there are natural boundaries in the frame, a building, a vertical building, the flat surface of a table, I'm going to align my photo to match them, just as a stylistic thing, to
help you better compose.
Yeah,
your images.
Exactly. It's just like in Photoshop, turning on the grid lines and then rotating the image. Not only do you have grid lines, you also have a horizon bar. So if you're off center, you can see
that's cool.
where the horizon is.
So it means there's an accelerometer or a gyroscope in there somewhere, I guess.
And these are just like neat little features just to enhance the shooting experience.
You said it has face detection?
Yeah, so there's face detection and smile detection. So
does the smile detection never works for me? Maybe because I have a beard?
There are different levels, small smile or big smile. So sometimes it'll force you to have a massive smile. I don't like smile detection because I think it's kind of cheesy.
It's real weird. You end up with real weird
all
pictures.
the photos look weird. It's never the real smile.
If I leave it
always
on,
4 smiles.
If I leave it on, it picks up Chloe Bananas is smiling every time.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the body some?
Yeah. So image quality, sensor, lens, important things. But what's also very notable about this camera is how small it is.
Yeah.
Or for some people, maybe it looks big for them.
Well. So if you're coming up from an iPhone or an Android phone or whatever, this is a lot bigger. There's a lot more space involved.
Or if you're coming up from a budget point and shoot.
Yeah, or one of those little Pentax jobs that fits inside an Altoids tin or something like that.
Yeah, so it's about 4 inches wide and the thickness is about 2 inches thick, about 2.5 inches tall. It's small compared to a DSLR.
Yeah.
Small compared to even a small compact DSLR like a Rebel. It's small compared to most mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras. Like this is the smallest MLSC that no one makes one this small anymore. The C3, both the 5N and the F3 are bigger, but this is smaller.
Right, and even if you had the pancake lens on, the smallest lens available for the NEX camera, this would still be a lot smaller than the mirrorless.
Yes.
So well, I find I can put the NEX in my jacket pocket if I'm wearing a big jacket and it's wintertime. It's not real comfortable in the summer. This has been my experience, at least.
Easily pocketable for jackets, not pocketable at all for pants and jeans.
What about cargo pants?
I think the 240 grams weighs it down too much in cargo pants.
Okay.
Yeah. So
also, you shouldn't wear cargo pants.
Also, you should not wear cargo pants or cargo shorts. but not for jeans. But given its weight, now I could put this big one in my big jacket pocket too.
Yeah.
But this weighs a lot more. I found myself carrying this a lot more, just going to random shows.
I find when I walk around with the NEX, more often than not, I'm just carrying it around in my hand.
And when you take the NEX out, if you don't have a bag, that's with the intent to really shoot photos.
Yeah.
I can take this around with this size. Maybe I'll shoot a photo, but I don't feel bad if I don't take photos with it because it doesn't weigh that much. It doesn't take up that much space. It just goes in my pocket, another pocket, one pocket, one pocket for the camera.
So one of the great things about the NEX series and a lot of the mirrorless cameras is that they're fast to turn on. Taking this out of your pocket, how soon can you be taking a picture?
I would say it's not as fast as I would like. So I'll demonstrate it now. So it's completely off right now, and it's on, and then this is fast because I've recently shut it down. Yeah. In the full shut off mode, it takes a little bit longer.
And is there a physical power switch, or is it
it's a button?
It's a button you have to hold down.
Yeah, it's a button you tap to turn it off, tap to turn it on. I actually don't like the place of the button that much because I'm used to, at least on my camera, it being a switch, and also I'm used to the view button, the play button on top, which is the exact same location.
That's one of those things you get used to as you use the camera, though, I find.
And the play button's actually, the review button's actually on the bottom.
And then, so the actual toggle for zoom is on the front edge of the camera?
The front edge of the camera.
That's a little unfortunate. I like a thumb for that. Feels like a better thumb option for me.
I didn't find myself zooming in all that much. What I do like, though, on the back, I mean, one-handed grip, really comfortable.
That's good.
I can do two-handed grip, one-handed grip, on the right side, and then rotating the lens on the left side. You do have control ring on the back.
Okay.
And with a D-pad, basically. And all of these buttons are programmable. Left, right, up, down, and the function button.
Is there a spinner on there as well?
Yep, that's control ring. So I right now have that for changing my aperture. And there's some defaults, so you can change, and set it to, display mode, flash, exposure compensation, and your shooting mode. Okay. But I have, for example, I have white balance set on the right as opposed to flash because I'm not going to use the flash. And white balance mode actually I like because unlike some of the other cameras, there's actually a cool grid here that shows you what color you're changing.
Oh, that's really neat.
From and to, which is really cool.
This is one of the places that I really like having the PASM knob on the top of the camera because it means that when you hand it to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, you can look at it without having to fiddle in menus.
Right, you quickly
like I do with my camera.
Switch the green. The green. Everyone knows green means dummy.
Green's easy.
Switch to green, and then they can take pictures.
Ready to go.
Yeah, that's a good point. You can actually, I can give this to my parents. They can take pictures in the evening, borrow it for a night, and just use that easy mode, and I don't think I have to fiddle with it. Wait, hold on, I gotta change the settings to make it dummy mode. Yeah, that's easy and easy to use.
Is the screen pretty good?
Screen's really good. It's a 3-inch screen. It's 1.2 million dots, and dots is really weird because it's not the same as pixels.
So that's subpixels?
It actually counts subpixels. It's the equivalent of a 640 by 480 screen on a 3-inch screen, but you can't actually see. You cannot see the pixels. It is Retina ready because. What Sony did was in the subpixels they added extra white subpixel for the screen to make it brighter in daylight, and I think that I can use it overcast situations no problem. Okay. I would say probably not like in the desert. So you go to Death Valley, you're going to want to kind of shield that thing. It's not particularly glary though. Like it's not very reflective, but LCDs are a definite limitation. There's a maximum amount of brightness that they can put out. It's a great bright LCD. It's not a touchscreen. A lot of these cameras now have touchscreens, and LCD is good enough that I can check my focus. And there's the peaking, which I think is probably my favorite feature. I absolutely love that. Yeah. And when people don't know what that is. You can turn a setting on, and it can have low, medium, high in different colors. It adds a white outline or a different color outline around whatever's in focus. So, for example, I have a figure here. He's not in focus right now, and the autofocus actually did not choose him to be in focus. So he's out of focus right now. He's blurry. Yeah. But if I just rotate the manual focus, and now you see that there is this white outline around his body. Yeah, he's in focus. And basically, if you're shooting something a long way away, you can use that white outline. Will move forward as you go, and it just lets you know exactly where you're focused. It makes it really easy to get focus on the eyes or the nose or whatever you're looking for. You can get it. It's almost like a augmented reality gauge of where your focus line is. Yeah, because you can see very clearly what things are moving, getting the white lines. Now, one thing I found is it's not real good when you're talking about high bokeh shots where there's
there's a big depth of field and a very narrow field that's focused, sometimes it makes it look like the focus field is a little bit wider. Can you adjust that on these cameras, or is that still a high-end camera?
No, yeah, it's going to be. You can adjust peaking a little bit, but I mean, you have to. It is contrast space autofocus, so it's even the peaking is using contrast space detection, so it's going to be only as inaccurate as the sensor allows. There's a built-in flash, which I want to show you just for a second. When I first used this camera, I thought I would never, ever use the flash. Like, why would I use a flash?
Flashes make bad pictures. Usually.
Yeah, exactly. But when you pop up the flash,
wow, that pops out high.
Pops out pretty high. And if I take a picture, it's going to be blown out for sure. Yeah, that is totally blown out.
Yeah.
What I can actually do, though, is it's flexible. I can hold it down, and I can aim it away at a ceiling.
You can make it a bounce flash?
And I can make it a bounce flash.
Is that by design, or is that just...
I want to say it is by design. So it's
still blown out.
It's still blown out, but at least I can see what's going on. And in something like a normal 8-foot tall room or a bar or something,
white ceilings.
Yep, you can actually use it as a bounce, and you won't get red eye and really bad blown out.
It's just going to give you some more light from the ceiling. How do you feel? Do you feel like that's sturdy? It looks like it pops out really far. That's a real fragile looking mechanism.
No, it's actually really sturdy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and does it pop out automatically, or do you have to press a button?
You can one button you can program.
Okay.
Be a flash button, or change the flash modes, or you can go into the menu and manually change the flash mode from auto to a fill flash, which means always on.
Right.
I usually have it flash off.
That's the right choice as a general rule, just for what it's worth. Let's talk about video a little bit.
Yeah, so
video is important on this.
All
kind of
these cameras have video now. It shoots 1080p.
Okay.
Basically, only 1080p.
30 frames per second.
Up to 60 frames per second.
Oh, wow.
60p at 28 megabits. You can't manually change to 720p. It's 1080p.
Oh, it's always. I mean, that's not a big deal. You can get a 32 gig flash SD card for what, like $35 now.
Yeah. What you can do is if you want to lower the resolution to 1440 by 1080, is record an MP4. Normally, it records an AVC HD, which is the Sony Panasonic format. Okay. Video looks good, like better than what you'll get with the iPhone for sure, better than what you get with video on a recording shoot. But it's very limited in that it's a built-in mic only, no external mic, and you can't configure too much when you're shooting video. And because of the slow focus ring, you're not going to be able to have as much control.
No rack focus on this guy.
No, I mean it's like for little video journals when you're on a trip or something.
Okay. Shooting a video of something cool that you happen to see, not.
If you want to see tigers attacking buffalo and capture on this camera,
that sounds pretty awesome. I totally want to see that. Did you see that?
I didn't see that. I saw on the internet only.
Big disappointment, Norm. Can you shoot photos while you're doing video though?
You can shoot up to 17 megapixel photos while you're shooting video. Again, if you're capturing that giant lion attack, I would want to take both photos and video for that.
Can you adjust zoom and stuff while you're shooting video as well? So you can adjust zoom.
Absolutely.
It's going to be slow though, I assume.
And there's a physical video button if you want to quickly just shoot video.
Oh, so
tap that and you're recording video. And of course, there's a little bit of a crop when you're shooting video.
Did you find that hard to hit? That button? Like on my camera, that button's too easy to hit. I frequently hit that when I'm trying to hit the review button instead, and then start a 3-second video. It looks like it's nice and recessed there.
Right, recessed.
So it's a little bit out of the way.
Out of the grip.
And does it take a long time to cycle after it finishes back into photo?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. It takes time to actually write to card.
Okay.
Yeah. So video is going to drain more battery life, but the battery life on this is actually pretty good. It's rated for 330 photos.
It's a rechargeable battery, right?
Rechargeable lithium-ion battery. And Sony, while they don't include a little battery dock to plug into the wall, it charges over micro USB. And Sony does actually...
so you have to open the door every time?
You have to open the door and plug it in, which means you can't buy a separate battery and charge one battery while...
so the battery's built in?
Well, no, you can't take the battery out. I mean, but you can't charge this battery while putting another battery in. Right. So you can put the battery in, and Sony does include like an AC adapter for fast charging, which is relatively fast. Okay.
Like 4 hours or overnight?
Yeah, I would overnight. Okay. I would say that, and it will even charge off your computer too. Okay. I didn't count whether it actually took 330 photos, but based on normal shooting, 1 week of shooting.
So how many photos have you taken since you got the camera?
Probably like 500.
Okay, and so you charge 2 or 3 times probably?
Yeah, and letting it linger. And the way I shoot, I review photos after I shoot every time, which is going to take more battery. So I'd say probably if you're that type of shooter who's always reviewing and looking and changing settings, you're not going to get nearly 330. 250 to 300 photos.
So we started out I kind of still don't know exactly who this camera's for. I mean, maybe it's for a professional photographer who carries a DSLR all day and then wants something they can take out with them at night. Well, that's smaller than that.
It is. That's exactly who it's for. Like you and me, we both own these cameras.
It's a nice. I bought it because it's all around,
and it's a great all-around camera. And we can rent lenses or buy lenses that can for special niche cases.
Right.
This is $600. This classic camera is already $600, $700.
Yeah.
This camera is $600 by itself. There is no reason we should be buying both of these.
Right. Yeah, that would be crazy town.
Too much overlap. You're buying too many things. If you have a Canon 5D Mark III, if you have a Nikon D800,
even like a 60D
if you're
or something like that?
If you're already well experienced with shooting, and you have a $1,000, $2,000 camera with lenses, and you want something more portable, there's no reason for them to buy this camera either, because then you're investing in a new lens ecosystem.
Right.
It's still too big. I mean, if you're going to carry this, you might as well carry the Rebel or the 5D.
Yeah, I mean, I bought that because it's high end. It's my high end camera.
Right.
Right.
This is the low end camera for people who own those high end cameras.
Okay.
Who own a 7D, who already have a big DSLR, but also want a camera, and they don't want to compromise in quality.
And they don't want to use their
iPhones.
phone. Yeah.
I never want to use my phone if I have this in my pocket.
Right.
And I'm not always going to have this in my pocket because this is, frankly, just a little bit too big. It's also good, I think. I bought my parents like one of these.
That's a camera you put in your bag, the NEX series.
Yeah.
This is a camera you put in your pocket.
Or your purse or something or whatever. I bought my parents one of these. They'll never buy another lens.
Right.
They're happy with the kit lens. They think it looks great and it looks big. I almost wish I bought them.
And the camera looks big or the pictures look big?
The camera looks big.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're getting more bang for the buck. I almost wish I bought them one of these because I think they would just be just as happy with this camera at the same price as they would with a camera they'll never change the lens out for.
It seems like the places that this really falls down though is if you want to be able to do wide angle shots or big zoom shots, or maybe it seemed like macro was pretty good.
Macro is excellent.
Yeah.
I think if you're just a regular day shooter, take this on a hiking trip.
Yeah.
It's not going to weigh you down that much. Vacations, you're not going to fumble a ton of things. And you'll be very happy with the photos.
Can you get an external charger for it if you want to pay the extra money?
I'm not sure if you can actually. This is not the same battery as.
It's a new battery style, yeah.
So I don't think you can. Maybe Sony sells all sorts of accessories. There is no hot shoe accessory, so no external.
That makes
mic,
sense.
Directional
in this class
mic,
camera, though, right?
Right. It has the built-in flash already. And don't confuse this with the Sony RX1, which is the $2,800 version of this with the full frame sensor. And that one, not only is it fixed lens, it's fixed zoom. So that one doesn't even have the digital zoom.
So who buys that? People with way too much money?
Yeah.
Okay.
People who where a small 1-inch sensor camera isn't good enough for them and they want full frame all the way.
When they look at our NEX cameras and say, that sensor is too small.
That's cute.
I need something, it's cute. Cute camera.
Yeah.
So I guess that'll do it then.
Yeah,
you like this a lot?
Sony RX100. I do like this a lot. I'm finding in my various use cases, it is complementing my current NEX.
Yeah. But in that case, you're using this as your proxy for the high-end camera.
Yeah.
When you buy a 5D Mark III or something like that, are you going to get rid of that and keep one of these?
I get rid of, when I upgrade, I get rid of the NEX mirrorless. I keep the RX100.
Something like that.
And I upgrade to a 7D or a 5D.
And how does it compare to the Canon and Nikon stuff?
I think get this over the Nikon J1 V1 systems because that ecosystem was not that great. Get this over. It's twice as expensive as the Canon S100, which is probably the best small sensor point and shoot.
So $300.
But I think the image quality is totally worth it.
Okay.
And I would say even get this over the Canon EOS M, which is their interchangeable mirrorless camera, which people have not been very happy with.
Sounds great. Thanks, Norm. We'll be back with more from Tested. Until then, I'm Will.
I'm Norm.
See you guys later.
Bye.